What's up guys, Asian here again with another Elsweyr PTS video, and today we're going to be exploring a little bit more in depth into the buff behind Flurry and kind of what it means for primarily the stamDK. This is primarily what I did the tests on, but these results could also kind of apply over to the stamSorc in some regards. I will kind of touch upon the few aspects of my testing here on the stamDK that might not necessarily be directly applicable over to the stamSorc here. Again, we are exploring Flurry as a potential spammable. So Flurry was buffed in the Elsweyr PTS. It got a buff of about 21% or so. So it is more in line with other, quote, melee spammables. So naturally the idea is, what classes are able to use Flurry as a spammable. The prime two candidates are Stamina Dragonknights and Stamina Sorcerers. Stamina Templars are probably going to be keeping on using jabs as their main spammable. Stamina Wardens, their rotation is centered around Shulks, and that's not really going to be changing anytime soon. Stamina Nightblades have surprise attack, so again, no really indication that Flurry is going to be stronger than surprise attack, especially that surprise attack gives a little bit of additional penetration bonus as a kind of side effect. And then we have Stamina Necromancers, which very similarly to Wardens will probably center the rotation around the Blast Bones active ability there. So naturally that leaves Stamina Dragonknights, which we've already kind of covered a little bit in terms of what spammables they might end up using. Noxious Breath is obviously one potential option along with Flurry. And then stamSorcs, which don't have any class spammables, so traditionally they've always used Flying Blade or Shrouded Daggers, but now with the Flurry buff, it might end up being the new spammable to use for Stamina Sorcerers. So basically what I went ahead and did here was I took a look at the various potential combinations that I could think of where Flurry might end up being particularly powerful. These basically are your standard stamDK build with just Flurry as a spammable instead of Noxious Breath as a spammable. Then there is using the Maelstrom dual wield set, and I'll go over the set specifics in a little bit here. But using the Maelstrom dual wield sets with two 5-piece bonuses, so basically two 5-piece sets. And then I used the Maelstrom set with only one 5-piece bonus. We kept the Monster Helm set, and we used 3-piece agility instead. So those were the different setups that I used, and I compared them all to just using straight up Noxious Breath as a spammable. Before we go into the parsers, let's go ahead and talk about the gear I use, the sort of testing scenarios and things like that. So as you can tell from the giant dummy in the back, I did do all of these tests on the raid dummy, so that way I could standardize all the buffs and debuffs that I was getting. So I've already mentioned the skills that I used. So I used Rapid Strikes as my spammable for 3 out of the 4 different scenarios. For the last scenario where I was using Noxious Breath as a spammable, instead of having Rapid Strikes here, I had Molten Whip instead for the additional weapon damage passive that you would get from the Seething Fury passive. So that was the only change that I made between the Noxious Breath and the Rapid Strikes spammable tests here. In terms of gear, so I believe I am in the 5-5 with the Maelstrom Dagger, so I'll go over each of the different gear combinations. So with the Noxious Breath, I should say the more traditional quote-unquote setup here, I used 5-piece Relequen on the body. I used the 2-piece Veladress. All pieces were medium. I did have a max health enchant on the helm because we are using our stamDK broth, which did get a slight nerf to health, so we did have to use a health enchant to kind of make up for that loss in health a little bit here. Then I used Perfected Lokkestiiz on the front bar here, 3 Bloodthirsty, 3 weapon damage enchants, and then double daggers, both sharpened, absorbed stam enchant and poison damage enchant. And the back bar was always an infused Maelstrom bow with a weapon damage enchant. Attributes: 64 points into stam. Using the Shadow Mundus, our stamDK broth was the food we decided to use, and I've already kind of went over the bars. So Running Slashes, Venom's Claws, Noxious Breath, Molten Whip, or Rapid Strikes depending on the specific setup I was running. Rearming Trap, Flawless Dawnbreaker on the back bar, Caltrops, Poison Injection, Endless Hail, Flames of Oblivion, Rearming Trap again, and Standard of Might. In terms of blue CPs, as well as green CPs, I had 100 into Mooncalf. Blue CPs was 56 Mastered Arms, 52 Thaumaturge, 61 Precise Strikes, 37 Piercing, and 64 into Mighty here. That's all kind of the build information. So this was what I used for the Noxious Breath spammable and the Rapid Strike spammable without using the Maelstrom Daggers. Now, the Maelstrom Daggers does buff Flurry, so as you can see here, when you deal damage with Flurry, your next single target damage over time ability used within 10 seconds gains 2003 spell and weapon damage. So on a stamDK, which has a fair amount of single target dot abilities, Maelstrom Daggers do seem to be a potentially strong option. On a stamSorc, it's not really going to be quite as strong because the only single target dot ability you really have as stamSorc, on the front bar at least, is going to be Running Slashes. Poison Injection also counts, as well as Rearming Trap. So a little bit less useful on a stam sword compared to on a stamDK, where you have rending slashes, noxious breath, venomous claws, rearming trap, and poison injection. So you have 5 single target dots compared to the only 3 I should say, on stam swords, and you really don't want to be using the cruel flurry buff on either rearming trap or noxious breath for the stamDK. So generally speaking, it'll be a little bit stronger on a stamDK just because you have one additional ability that is buffed by the cruel flurry set here. So for the Maelstrom tests, I did 2 Maelstrom tests, like I mentioned earlier. The first one was without the Monster Helm set, so I used 5-piece Lokkestiiz, 5-piece Relequen, but I didn't have the Monster Helm set here. Again, same idea, all medium, 1 health enchant on a large piece here. In the second combination I used was I kept the Monster Helm set, so I kept Veladreth, and instead of Lokkestiiz as the jewelry sets, I used Agility instead. Again, same idea though, 3 Bloodthirsty, 3 weapon damage chance. So those were the 4 different setups that I used. And here are the results. Here you can see the 4 different results here, and you can see we had a little bit of a DPS swing, especially with this parse here, which we'll see in a second here. So this is the Noxious Breath as our main spammable here. We can see we pulled 82.9k. We are rounding to the nearest 100th. And over here, this is using Rapid Strikes as a spammable without the Maelstrom Daggers, and we pulled 81.7k. This was using the Maelstrom Daggers, but we had Veladreth as our Monster Helm set and 3-piece Agility. We pulled 76.9k. And this was with Rapid Strikes with the Maelstrom Daggers, but 5-piece Lokkestiiz and 5-piece Relequen instead, and we pulled 82k if we round up to the nearest 100. So as you can see here, using Noxious Breath as a spammable is still going to be the strongest option here, and especially when we take a look at our overall sustain. So if we open up our chart here and look at stamina, you can see here that we didn't really have any sustain issues at all. We did dip below 50 a few times here, but overall not that worrisome in terms of sustain. But if we take a look at, for example, using Rapid Strikes as our primary spammable, I did have the heavy attack, I believe, once. So yes, 1 heavy attack here. Take a look at our stamina. You can see we did end up almost running out of steam here towards the end, which is where I had to use that once heavy attack build. Then over here, you can see here sustain with the Maelstrom running 3 agility and the Veladreths. Definitely a lot worse for the wear. You can see we dipped down close to 0 twice here, and did have to use a few heavy attacks. I believe I had to use 3 heavy attacks in total for this parse here. And we see a similar kind of story here with the Maelstrom Daggers running 5 Lokkestiiz and 5 Relequen, where we did dip to 0% 1, 2, almost 3 times in total. Again, we had to do 1 heavy attack here, but this wasn't quite as bad as running 3 agility with 2 Veladreth here. So overall, Maelstrom builds themselves do seem to be pretty strong overall compared to where they used to be. However, at least for stamDKs, you can see here that Noxious Breath as a spammable is still going to be stronger, and you have better sustain overall. So 1253, 1292 compared to here 1296, 1267 compared to 1365. So I would probably say yes, a Maelstrom build could work on a stamDK, but you are going to have worse sustain overall compared to just using plain Noxious Breath as your primary spammable. Now, in terms of where this falls for stam sorks, on the other hand, again, I mentioned this earlier when I went over skills and the Maelstrom dagger set, but stam sorks, the only damage over time ability you'll be buffing would be rending slashes, which means you'll probably be sitting closer to where you're just using Flurry as your main spammable. We've already kind of taken a look at this, at least I've taken a look at this. I'm not sure if I made a video about it or not. Taking a look at Flying Blades versus Rapid Strikes as your primary spammable, and they're both very comparable to each other, so I would say I would need to go back and actually test on the stam sork specifically, but just using these tests as sort of a basis, it does seem like a Maelstrom build on a stam sork at least might have, or at the very least might match your typical Veladreth without the Maelstrom dagger. So I will be going over that in a separate video before I release all the builds, just to kind of go over stam sorks, whether a Maelstrom build would be beneficial or not on a stam sork. So that is it for this video. Hope you guys found this informative. If you guys have any questions or comments about the Maelstrom daggers, please feel free to let me know down in the comment section below. Again, I hope you guys found this video informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.